Hello and a very warm welcome to my Christmas room box series. Now, one of my plans for the room box is to have a panelled door in the back which will look out onto a nice snowy scene which I can light up at the back of the room box once it's complete. So what I want to do today is cut into the back panel and build a false door. So let's get started. Okay, so what I want to do first of all is work out where to make the cut for the door. So I haven't got that much room on the back panel there, so I've just popped the Christmas tree in place there, and that's where it will sit. Then I want to have the chimney breast, and that will be a fairly narrow chimney breast there, and that can maybe overlap the tree a little bit, and then the door will go over on this side. So what I'm also going to do is just put my armchair into place like that. So I want to come in a little bit from that side because I may have a curtain there, I'm not sure yet. The curtain might take up too much space, so we'll see how it looks when I've actually built it. But I'll come in probably by about 12mm or half an inch. And then I just sort of want to think how wide the chimney breast will be, because that's obviously going to be sort of quite a main focus of the room. So we'll probably start it about there and then bring it to about there. So carry that up like that, and then I could have the door, just a sort of narrow single door to about there. Yeah, and then the entire chimney breast will be that wide, and then obviously the mantelpiece will be enclosed within that area. Yeah, so I think that's about right. So the door will be over there. So what I want to do now is dismantle the room box, and then I can copy those measurements all the way down to the bottom of the panel and then actually make the cut. And it's a really good idea when you're planning a room box to actually put in the things that you're going to be using in there, just to see how much space you've got. Because I don't know about you, but when you're sort of mentally thinking about something, you always sort of picture it being a lot larger than it is. Okay, so let's get the room box taken down and then we can actually cut out the space for the door. So what I also did before I removed the back panel from the room box was just draw a line along the bottom where it actually slots into the bottom panel of the box, and I don't want to cut through that, so I'll leave that sort of bottom strip intact there. So what I want to do now is copy these pencil marks all the way up the edges of the panel. So my first one was 12mm in. I've gone to sort of 13 there, so I'll just take that back to 12 and then do that at the top and bottom of the piece. And this way you're going to get nice straight lines. So 12mm there, or half an inch, but obviously it depends upon the size of your room box and what you're actually going to be placing in there. And then the actual width of the door, so if I actually go from my 12mm pencil mark there, I've measured to 69mm. So that would make it about 2 3/4 of an inch, or just under 3 foot. So it's quite a narrow door, but I think you can get away with that in room boxes. So I want to go from the edge of the room box to 81mm. So do that at the top and bottom as well. $81mm there. And then turn and join those lines up. Position the rule just beneath them to allow for the thickness of your pencil. And then do that line all the way up, all the way along. Same there. And then for the height of the door, I'm going to go to 165mm, and that is 6.5 inches. So I'm going there from my sort of line above my floor panel and then to 165mm, 6.5 inches. And again, do that at each side of your door opening. And then you can join that one up as well. And I'm just going to double check that I was on the correct line at the bottom there. So 42, and that was 41.5, so I'm just going to bring that down a tiny bit. I knew that didn't feel right. There. Okay, so we're now ready to cut this out. So what I'm actually going to start by doing is making a little nick in each corner of the piece that I want to remove. So just pop your knife in and cut through. Just using the tip of the knife, go all the way through if you can. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. Just always pay attention to where your fingers are in relation to the blade. Make sure they're well clear. Same along there. Come down the line as well. And what this does is actually help to keep your cuts on track so that you're not going to sort of go past the area that you want to cut out. Even if you sort of slip, your knife will sort of naturally stay within the little grooves. So do that at those bottom corners as well. You can then bring in your rule and cut in the normal way. Now I'm actually going to cut against the grain first, and that's a rule that you should always stick to, and then you're less likely to actually split the wood. And what I was going to say, if you would find it easier just to cut all the way down and cut that little bottom strip out, you can do that, because then you can always glue it back in. So if you find that easier, then you can do it that way. Or if you sort of accidentally cut through, don't worry, because we can just glue that back in. So hold nice and tightly onto your rule, and always just begin by making a sort of few light cuts. And then you can go a little bit further into the wood. Just take your time. Keep going till you feel that the tip of your knife is through, and I can feel that cutting through now. And then you can check if you're through by actually turning the piece over, and there I can see my line. So I'm now going to move on to my other side and do the same thing again. And just start off lightly. Once you're sort of partly through, you can move your rule away if that helps. And this is 3mm thick, 1/8 of an inch thick, this sheet wood. But as you can see, it is fairly easy to cut through. It is quite a nice light wood, and it's called light ply. Now, if you haven't seen my first video where I actually built the room box, you can go back to that one, and you will actually find an Amazon affiliate link in the description box for the wood packs. Okay, so I'm just going to turn so I can come back that way and get the blade right into the corner there. I can feel that that's going through as well. So now my final cut at the bottom there. I'm just going to go around with the blade one more time to make sure that I'm completely through. When you hear that click, it's because you haven't gone all the way through. So you want to free all of those pieces before you try to push the panel out. Otherwise you might split the wood. It's trying to pop out now, so that must be free. Let's have a look. And if it's catching anywhere, don't just push, as you will splinter or split the wood. And there we are. There's our door opening. So I'm going to be building a super simple door today. Sides, top, bottom, and then a panelled frame on the inside. And for the door I'm going to be using two sizes of strip. So this is a Bishi strip, 6mm by 3mm, or 1/4 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. And then for the pane divides, I'm going to be using my Ibishi 1.5mm square strip, or 1/16 of an inch. And both of those are available in my Etsy shop. So just begin by measuring your door opening and then making that pencil mark onto your piece of wood. And it's always better to actually measure and mark up with your rule than actually sort of popping it into the door and measuring that way. Like that, make the pencil mark, and I'm going to be using my super handy mitre guillotine to cut the pieces, and I've got the plate there set for the straight cut. So just pop the strip in there, line it up with the line on the plate there, and then make your cut. Super easy like that. These are also available in my Etsy shop. Doing a lot of plug-in today. Pop that piece into place. And I always advise that you measure both sides of the door, just in case you have cut one slightly higher or lower. It's always better to get a more accurate fit. And that piece as well, I wonder if that piece is long enough. That's about 1 millimetre shorter, so I'm going to use the longer one, as I'll have trouble actually getting that into the guillotine. And mark up the second piece there. And again, make your cut. Pop that piece in as well. And you now want to measure between those two. So hold your side pieces apart like that, or push them to the outer edges of the opening, and then measure in between. And I'm going to make that measurement at the bottom as well. Again, just push the pieces to the outer edges of the cutout. That is actually the same, so that's good. Again, measure up your piece. Put that into place. And then the same with the bottom piece. I've got a bit of an angle there, so I'm just going to trim that straight with the cutter. And then take my measurement. Ooh. And then pop that piece into place as well. And we're now going to measure up in the same way for our pane divides. So again, make sure the top and bottom pieces are pushed against the edges of the cutout, and then take your measurement and then measure up your first piece. And this 1.5mm strip can actually just be cut with your craft knife. That's really easy to snip through, like that. Pop that piece into place, and then what I'm going to do is actually just take a measurement for the centre. Let's go from the outer edges of the frame. Goes there. Same at the top there. We can then put the central pane into position so that we can get the measurements for the outer frames. So with that then sitting in place there, and that's bending a little bit, so I'm going to trim a tiny bit off, get that sitting right in the centre, and then measure each of those outer spaces. And then again, cut your pieces. I'm just going to trim that one off. So I think I'm going to have my panes about 1 inch high, each of them. I mean, what, 1, 2, 3, so I need 4 panes then for each side, and then when we actually come to glue the pieces into place, we can make exact measurements along each edge for the position. So decide how many pane divides you'll need and then cut your smaller pieces, and then we can actually start gluing the whole frame together. Okay, so all of my pieces are now cut, and I've just made measurements on my central pane divide of where I need to place then my smaller horizontal divides. Now it doesn't work out exactly, so I've got a slightly larger pane at the top and bottom, or slightly larger panes at the top and bottom, and that's just by 0.5 millimetre. And then the 3 central panes will be the same size. And I always recommend, if you can't divide a measurement exactly, so in this case by 5, then you either put the difference in the centre or you put the differences at the top and bottom, divide it out into 2 and put them at the top and bottom. And it's only ever going to be a fraction of a millimetre, so it's not actually going to be noticeable once the piece is built. So if you're making the room box that I'm making and you're going to have a door exactly the same as mine, I'll give you the measurements that I've got here. And if I start from what will become the top of the central pane divide, we'll be positioning the first horizontal divide at or below 29 millimetres. And I'll give you the millimetres first and then we'll do the inches. So the first pane divide will be below 29 millimetres, and make a note of these if you will. The next one will be below 59 millimetres, and then below 89.5 millimetres, and then below 119.5 millimetres. So now let's find the inch measurements. So the first one then will be 1 9/64, and then 2 21/64, and then 3 17/32, and 4 5/16. Okay, so let's start gluing the pieces together. Okay, so we're going to begin then by gluing the top of the outer frame to the edge of the side frame, or to the top edge of the side frame. Apply a bit of glue and then press that into place, making sure you've got a nice flush edge along the top. And here you can use the lines on your cutting mat to make sure you're getting everything lined up. You've got that nice straight edge along the top so that it will fit nicely back into the opening. Okay, so give that a press, and then what we're going to do is bring in that central divide that we've just marked up, lay it into place alongside the first side, and then we're going to transfer those measurements. So if you do your little measurement at the top there, and I actually went along and shaded in where the strip pieces will go, just so that I know they sit then below those pencil marks. And this will help us to keep those smaller horizontal divides straight. And then what you can do is just lay that piece into place as well, so you've got that nice flush edge along the top, and then do the same at that side. I should have brushed all the bits off my desk first. And I put a little mark as well at the top of this central divide, so I knew, where the top was, which bit was the top, which end was the top. I'm then going to copy those marks onto that side as well, so that my pieces will sit below the pencil marks. And if we hadn't sort of got a top piece there, we could have just obviously used those measurements down the sides as well, but because we needed to deduct that as well, it's just easier to do it this way. Okay, so just pop that to one side for now. We're now going to start positioning those pane divides. So again, line up your side piece so that your pencil lines are sort of in line with a line on your cutting mat, or the first one anyway. And then pop that first divide into place. So put a bit of glue on both ends and then lay that into place. You've got that nice straight line along there. Remember, it will sit below your pencil line. Give that a press and then sort of realign and work your way down. Don't worry if it sort of goes off at an angle, as long as your sort of side or that edge of it is in the right place. We can just keep straightening them up. Both ends of this one as well. And just work your way down. Okay, so now bring back in your central divide and apply a bit of glue to the top. And then position that so it's sitting directly below that central pencil line we made on the top piece. And then press it against your horizontal divides, making sure they're lined up below the pencil lines. Give it all a gentle press. Make sure all of the glued areas are touching. That, and we can now glue the remaining horizontal divides into place. And this time it's easier because you've got your first one to line them up with. Again, put a bit of glue on each end. Line up with your lines again to make sure you're staying straight. And again, work your way down. Okay, so now apply a bit of glue onto the bottom of that central divide. And onto both sides of the bottom strip, bottom door frame. Like that. Pop that into place. Again, get in the bottom of that central divide lined up with your pencil mark. Making sure you've got that nice flush edge along there as well. Give it all a gentle press. You never want to press too hard with things like this, as they'll all just sort of ping apart. Like that. And then just put a bit of glue on the top frame as well, on the end there. Touch up those ends if you've taken your time. And then bring in your final side. Again, getting lined up at the top and bottom. And then you can position your smaller frame divides as well. Make sure that they're all sitting just below the little pencil marks. Get it all lined up. Make sure all of the glued areas are touching, and then give it a really gentle press on all the glued, or against all the glued areas. Oops, bottom bit's pung out of place there. So give it all a good press, press and hold. Okay, so I'm now going to let that dry off completely, and then we can gently sand off the pencil marks before applying a coat of paint. Once you've allowed your door frame to dry off completely, come in with either an eraser or a piece of fine grade sandpaper and just very gently remove your pencil marks. Once you've removed all of the pencil marks, use a soft brush to remove the sanding dust. And this piece is now ready to paint. So as the back of my room box is going to be completely hidden, I'm only going to be applying paint to one side of the door. But what you do want to be sure of is to get your paint along the inside edges of your pane divides and the frame, because obviously that will still be seen when the door is in place. So for my door and for all of the woodwork in my room box, I'm going to be using this natural calico emulsion paint, which is a lovely creamy colour. And I've got actually a 5 litre tub of this, so I've just dispensed some into a smaller pot just to make it easier to get into. So I'll do a couple of coats of this and sand in between coats. So I'm just coming in now with a finer brush just to get along the edges of those pane divides. Okay, so that's one coat of paint then on the front of the door. And just as you're going along, take a look from all angles so that you make sure you're getting the paint on, you know, all of the strip pieces, and there's not going to be any natural wood showing. And then what I like to do before I leave that to dry is just sort of prop it up off the sheet so that it's not going to stick to your sheet while the paint dries, as otherwise as you're pulling that off you'll either get lots of bits of your painting card onto the back of it, and as you're pulling it away you may also sort of break your door. So just make sure it's sitting away from the card. Now I'm going to leave this to dry overnight. I'll remove it from the sheet in the morning and give it a gentle sand, and then attach it again and we'll give it another coat, and then we can actually dry fit the door into the room box. So I'll see you again in the morning. Okay, so it's the next morning now and the paint has completely dried, so I'm just going to use a 500 grade sandpaper to give this a gentle sand, but do make sure you remove it from your painting card before you sand, otherwise when you do your second coat you'll just be painting in all of the sanding dust. Again, once you've finished sanding, use your soft brush to remove the paint dust. You can then secure your frame back onto your painting sheet for a second coat. Okay, so my door frame is now completely dry, so I'm going to fit that into place. And I'm just dry fitting at this stage. I'm not going to actually attach this because I want to decorate the room box first. So that's a little bit tight now. I've applied a second coat of paint, but I'm actually quite happy with that fit because it does actually go into the opening. So if you were struggling to even get that inside the opening, then do a little bit of sanding, but only do a little bit at a time because we don't want to create too much gapping or for that to be too loose in there. But what we will do once we've actually decorated this back panel is create a thin frame to go around the outside edge of the door, and that will really sort of tidy off that edge. But like I say, we'll get the wallpaper in place first and that will create a really nice finish. So I'm going to leave it there for today, and as soon as I can get back to the room box I will, and then I'll upload the next episode. But I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and I'll see you again soon. So until then, take care. Bye.